This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are designing the future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this is a very special episode that we recorded at South by Southwest 2026. I sat down with leadership advisor and author Tony Martignetti to explore the idea of hidden brilliance and why the best leaders help others bring their full selves to the work they do. I'm here with Tony Martignetti in the afterglow of speaking at South by Southwest for the first time. Tony, first of all, this is something a lot of people have on their bucket list. I know I did. Like the ability to speak in front of a crowd like this, that's just like forward thinking about technology, film, television, business. And now we both had a chance to speak here for the first time. To me, it was pretty awesome. You actually had a couple talks today. So for folks listening to this who like, man, I'd love to get on South by stage one day. Or I'd like to get, I know you've done the TEDs before, but like I'd like to get on stage. What's it feel after the fact?
Well, it feels amazing. I mean, it just feels electric in terms of the ability to bring a message to a big audience and to see the reaction from people that they see, that you see them and that they feel inspired by what you're sharing. And they're looking forward to seeing more in terms of your message and the book to come out. So yeah, I feel very electric.
Yeah, it's funny you said that because with the crowd and being in a South by Southwest crowd is because, you know, when you do anything that's like where public have to be there and, you know, they either have to pay to be there or they're there for, you know, making their time, you always think, and it's something since I've been in media whole life, like, is anybody going to show up? And that's the first one. Anybody going to show up? And second, if they show up, are they going to care? And then I noticed like the South by crowd is just so engaged. Like you and I share the stage and I would, you know, when you would answer a question, I would just look out at the audience and just see like everyone's like looking. Like, you know, obviously you have a couple people on their cell phones because you can't resist that. But like the idea of like looking at a crowd of people that are just fully engaged in what you have to say. I mean, at the end of the day, as someone like who speaks, writes books, it's great that people buy and interact. But like when you see that engagement, man, that is just like, I don't know if there's a better high than that.
I couldn't agree more. And it's funny how you mentioned about the cell phone that, you know, I've come to agree that there's, you know, even if people are looking at their cell phone, doesn't mean they're completely checked out, because it might be that they're taking notes. It could be that they're, you know, trying to, tune in to what is going on by, you know, being there and, you know, finding ways to use their phone as a medium for capturing.
And you said notes. And here's how engaged a crowd is. There's actually people, while you were speaking, taking notes on paper and pen. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? They're not only listening, but they're like literally, like this is like a college seminar or something like that. Do you ever get, I wouldn't say tired of it, but does that ever lose any luster, the fact that people are so into what you have to say that they're like, oh shoot, this is so important, I'm going to write this down.
Yeah, and I think that's part of, you know, the honing of your message is making sure that you're doing things that really are clear, that people are understanding the message, and you've done the work up front that allows it to be, rememberable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that's something that I'm proud of, that, you know, I've done the work to create something that is resonant and clear enough that people can take away the message and use it in their own way.
And, on our panel, we spoke to, we talked about the long miles you put in to get into this because, you know, and I joked something like, you know, you see a lot of these thought leaders that like come out of thin air and they have great ideas and they share it, but like people like you who've been in the trenches and have like really worked it and figured out why this messaging and why the idea behind the book works because you were there. It's not like you were fresh-eyed kid like, I've got this idea about illumination. Hold on, let me explain this. This just came to me when in the middle of the night last night. This is what I want to tell you about this. But this all comes from years and years of experience, the struggles you had to deal with, and then getting to a point where you've written multiple books, and now you're about to release this latest book about illumination. For folks who weren't at the panel, tell us about like this journey about the last 20, 30 years that led you to being on the South by Southwest. And I'm putting you on the spot by having you give the truncated version of it. But like this idea of like you putting in the time, and I joke, getting the receipts of like the work you've put into it. So share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll first start by saying the receipts are both mental, physical, emotional, and financial. All those things come along the journey. So it is true. And so I'll share the abridged version here to say that, you know, I started out in the world of being an artist, which as a child I was drawing paintings and creating worlds that had an emotional resonance with people. And then that led down this path of maybe I was going to do that as a career. But I took a left turn and got into the world of studying pre-med. That got me into business because I decided to take that turn. Spent 25 years working in industry and biotech and high tech from a finance and strategy profession. And that was wonderful, but it wasn't me. And what I found is that after I left that career and got into the world of leadership development, being an author and a coach, it was wonderful, but I felt like there was still something missing. And, I battled through many different twists and turns along that journey, even before I got into this work of battling depression, burnout, lots of really dark moments. But what I found was when I got into the moment where I found illumination, it was when I realized that I need to bring parts of me back to the table. The artist had to return and didn't leave the things that I had along the way. What I often say is that I have to transcend and include the past. And so that's where I'm at now. Illumination is about bringing the parts of me back to the table. And that's the invitation that I give other people, is to say, what are you leaving behind that could be the very key that unlocks a door to your self-expression and to your aliveness?
And you lay out that framework in the new book, which comes out in the fall. So let's plug it right now. Name of the book, and then I'm going to ask you a question because we talked a lot about it yesterday. But go ahead, give us everything.
The book is called Illuminating Hidden Brilliance, and the book comes out in the fall, and I'm excited because it's going to give people a roadmap and lots of practical tools they can use as they're navigating the book to create their own path to their hidden brilliance, not just individually, but also as teams.
Yeah, and so you shared a couple stories of how you've helped teams with that, but people think hidden brilliance, and it sounds very ephemeral, and it sounds very way out there, hippy dippy. But you talked about it, the fact that you have this artistic background and you merge it with your business savvy and MBA and all that jazz that you got, right? And a lot of people, and you talk about it, is I'm gonna see if I get this right because even you stumbled on this, but they are successful on the outside, but they're numb on the inside.
Yes.
I think I butchered your line there, because of the fact of them tampering down this light. So tell me about that issue that leaders deal with.
Oh, now I won't forget it. So outwardly successful, inwardly numb. And outward success really comes from the fact that you've accumulated all the accolades, the titles, all of the receipts that we talk about, the outward receipts of external validation. But the problem is, if you don't feel it on the inside, it becomes really shallow, and it becomes something that's not sustainable long term. And so that inward numbness comes from this feeling of you're asking the question, is this it? Is this what I worked so hard for? And that feeling is something a lot of people navigate, especially when they go through a transition in life where they say, okay, I've reached this time, maybe it's reach 50 or 40 or whatever it may be, and you decide, what do I want my next chapter to look like? And am I living the life that I want to be living?
And to sort of quell that numbness or break free of it, you talk about how you merge the skills that you've trampled down, you've kept down, and you share this great story about working with a team about how it was like an innovation project, and you were able to find the hidden brilliance within all these people, and then the ripple effects. Because one of the things you like to say is like, it's great to connect with people with this hidden brilliance of stuff, but also it actually will affect your work. Like it'll make your work better. So share that story.
Yeah, I mean, I just start by, it's like a catalyst. When you start to kind of see things bubble up, the hidden brilliance becomes like a catalyst for many things that happen after that because people connect in a different level. And so, to share the story, it was this innovation team that had lost their spark, if you will. And so I'm just going to do this in the short version.
Yeah.
So I was called in to kind of create a path for them to connect on a different level. And we started by just asking the question of, what are some things that you're doing outside of work that you have never shared or never brought to the table here? And we, after a brief pause of people saying like, what? I had people sharing. They said, well, I'm a poet. And this person said they're a woodworker. And the other person was like a gamer. And, all those different elements started to bubble up in the room. And, when I asked them, well, how do you think those identities could be applied in the work you're doing? And quickly they started to find connection points. They bridged their outside interests, their outside hobbies and passions, their identities into work that could be applied And before you know it, they started finding a path to using the poetry as a way to use customer stories, and the woodwork as a way to redesign a foundation for different ways of building processes, and so on and so forth. So it's really a powerful framework for getting people to think differently about their own work and doing it together.
And the hidden light, though, one thing is it's not always as obvious. Like,
No.
I mean, obviously your story's great because it's like tangible. Oh, a poet, a
Yeah.
woodworker. But sometimes people don't even know what that is. And I remember, before our chat at South by, you said, "Hey, I'd like to ask the audience if they've ever experienced this." And I was like, "All right, Tony, I don't know if this is a good idea or not," but we asked, and a lady did speak up about the fact that she was pursuing business, but she as a consultant, but she also wanted to bring her philosophy and her philosophy background to it, and merging it, and she didn't know how to connect those two. So for people, and people in the audience were like, "Oh shoot, I don't know how to answer this," because I think for a lot of people they don't, and it has a lot to do with that effect of like, push it down, push it down, push it down. How does a framework, or maybe stuff you share, like how do you help people find that like sort of inner light that's there? Is there a way to examine your life that could bring that inward to the office?
Yeah, I love that you point this out because, and I'll also say that the doing of it, there's a lot of courage that's involved here. So people have to have that courage to be able to say, once I find it, how do I have the courage to express it? But the finding of it, it really comes down to something that I have found through my podcast, The Virtual Campfire, which is called the flashpoint, a point in your journey that has ignited your spark in the world. And those are sometimes the moments when our hidden brilliance comes. It's the chaotic elements of like, well, my life was this way, and then all of a sudden something happened, and I've had to like change the way I look at my life. Maybe it's traumatic. Maybe it's something that you've navigated in your career, and you've realized something about yourself, and everything changed. And so those flashpoint moments are one way that people discover their path, is they discover their identity through traumatic elements of their life. So that's just one example.
And I know your framework works for a lot of people, but a lot of your focus is leaders. And so we all know that to be a leader of even like whether it's a large or small company, there's a performative aspect of it. Like you've got to play a role. With Jensen Huang, when he goes out, he always wears that goofy leather jacket because it's part of his persona to play that, right? But for a lot of leaders, it's hard for them to kind of embrace their hidden brilliance because, hey, I've got an air about me. I gotta look like the boss. And I know you and I joked about that viral McDonald's CEO a couple weeks ago who was filmed on purpose for a TikTok of him trying out the new burger, and everyone's just kind of roasting him because he ate it awkwardly, like he didn't really want to do it. And again, that's I often joke that never talk to babies and CEOs because they have nothing to say because they're so sheltered, right? And so the CEO gets put in an opportunity where like it probably wasn't like who thought of that idea to put him in that space, but he probably thought like, oh, this could be a good idea for me. So that's an example of like someone putting themselves out there and it didn't work. Whether they put themselves out in the right way by showing you eating a hamburger, because I think if you put a camera on any of us eating a hamburger, we all may look goofy. Like if you put a camera on me eating it, you probably think, like, what has that person ever eaten something before? So like, how do you take those risks? Like the McDonald's one, great example. This guy, I bet you 99.9% of the planet wouldn't even know who the CEO of McDonald's is, even though it's probably one of the biggest conglomerates on the planet. So how do you take those steps of showing your hidden brilliance, coming out of your shell as that leader, but also almost, I don't know what I'm going to say, but like, don't worry about failing at showing your hidden brilliance? I know it's a roundabout way of saying like, don't be afraid to show your light, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting example because it's like, for that example, I mean, showing yourself is important, but it's got to be something that's really aligned with who you are. In that example, I think it's something that he wasn't really aligned with that message. And I think that's where it really failed so much. And honestly, I think that's also a message like, look, don't eat food on video. It's probably not a good idea.
Can't win. Yeah.
Many people do it, but I think it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
But I think that, it's okay to fail, but make sure that you're doing it in a way that's authentic and real to you. And there's no, I was going to say on brand, but I think it's really about, trying things out and doing it in a way that's intentional to who you are. And that's where the hidden brilliance comes from, this place of, I know that I've found something that really connects with me deeply. And even if it doesn't land, that's okay. I'm going to own that and be willing to try it again because I know innate that this is who I am.
Yeah, like in the McDonald's case, like if he had failed like the stockholders meeting and he goofed up, it's like, okay, I tried that but that's what I do. That's what I'm supposed to do as CEO. But like when you put yourself in a situation where that's not what you normally do, it's hard. So for folks that like maybe are afraid, maybe that's obviously the McDonald's one is an extreme one.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to sometimes find like if you have trouble finding that flashpoint that you mentioned earlier, what do you tell the people about like the risk reward, right? Because that's most CEOs is like, what's this going to cost me?
Yeah.
And what am I going to get out of it at the end? So let's start with what's going to cost me.
Yeah, what it's going to cost you is if you don't do it, it's going to cost you to be stuck in your pattern of asking the question, is this it? Am I going to get into a place where I'm bored of my life the way it is? And I know that sounds really dramatic, but it's true. I mean, at some point you'll ask, I should have done that, or I should have tried this, or I should have lived into this potential and felt like there was something missing. I'll just point this out because I think there's something really powerful about this concept of Todd Henry is a creator, an author, brilliant guy who wrote a book called Die Empty. And he's always talked about this idea that when the most valuable property in the world is the cemetery, because people have gone to their grave with their ideas in them that they'd never expressed. And so when you think about that idea, it's really what we're talking about here. If you feel like there's something inside of you that's dying to get out, let it out. And if you regret not putting that idea in the world, then we're going to regret not having you put that idea out in the world. That's what we want to make sure, is if you have something inside of you that's wanting to get out, put it out there. And do it scared. Do it with all the things that come along with that. Even be open to failing first, because eventually it'll work out. Even if the world isn't ready for it, do it. Because what happens is eventually we all get on board. We'll all be ready for it eventually.
Yeah, and that's the reward. It's funny you talk about that because I just read the library book by Susan Orlean, and she talks about the power of books and reading and libraries. And in Senegal, when people die, they say their library has burned, which is such a great line because, I mean, you don't think about it, but like we are a collection of our memories and thoughts and expertise, and this idea of not putting yourself out there if you have something to share. Like, I mean, obviously not everyone ever has a banger of an idea, not everyone's, but the idea of like putting yourself out there, and it's something that you've kind of embraced during the course, this latter half of your career. I don't want to say the back nine, but the second half of your career. But this idea of sharing what you've learned, why has that been so important to you as in this part of your career? So the first 30 years, you was the rise and grind, working in biotech, life sciences, and now the next half is just helping people, again, find that inner light, hidden brilliance. Why is that so important to you now?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's just that, seeing too many people feeling like they're not seen. And I think that to me is, it frustrates me. It's almost this feeling of inequity in the world where we feel like some people have the loudest voices and they don't have a lot to say. But yet the people who need their voice to be heard are not. And we need to make sure that those people have the courage and the place to share what's really inside of them. And I think that to me is the mission that really lights me up the most, is to know that there's people out there who have something brilliant to share, and we all want to hear it.
That's great. And, it's funny. I think about my time on this planet working for people. Being unseen, and this could just be me, is worse than having a mean boss.
Yeah.
Like, to me, like, I would rather the boss care enough to yell, what have you. Obviously, nothing that crosses the line to illegalities or moralness, but just like the idea of like, I'd rather that than feel like unseen, ignored.
Yeah.
Why do you think leaders feel like it's okay? And I'm not saying they do this consciously, maybe it's subconscious. Why do they feel like it's okay to have people feel unseen, but I don't want to be mean to them? So they have the self-awareness to be like, hey, I'm not going to be Steve Jobs in the 80s and flip desk and stuff like that. But also, if they're unseen, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Well, first of all, I'll say it's sometimes it's not ill intent. I mean, it's just a simple reason of like we move fast and we feel like there's just not enough time to slow down and really, spend time to get to know people on a level that really gets them to reveal more of themselves. And there's also on the employee side or the side of the people who are, having these things inside and they just don't know how to express it and they don't have the courage to bring it to the table. So there's a lot of that, both sides needing to come to the table with this sense of like, I see you and I want to be seen element. And so I think there's that, but it's also companies aren't wired for creating a path for people to get outside of their roles and their titles. And so we need to create a sense of how can we cross boundaries, create some interweaving between different places. But we need to create a path for leaders to see that there's value in that. Not just in getting those ideas out, but also in retaining people and keeping people engaged more than just, hey, I work in finance, therefore I do numbers, but hey, why don't you work across this initiative that will allow you to explore other interests or create paths to bringing more than just your numbers experience.
Yeah. So, I feel like one of the default settings that most industries are in, and this is across the board, is people are surviving but not thriving.
Oh, yeah.
Is that just kind of baked into Western culture, business, like this idea of like, hey, listen, treat me well, I'm seen, everything's great, but I'm working so hard, I feel like I'm just getting by. How do, in terms of the work of Hidden Brilliance, how does like following that framework help with that? Because I think that's one of the things that, I ask people in the culture and people space, there's no answer to it. Like they're like, they try to, to word salad an answer of like trying to fix that. But I think it's, and a phrase I despise, but I'm going to use it here is like, it is what it is almost. Like this idea of like, it is what it is. The company has to hit these projections, have to make these goals, have to hit this profit, and everything else kind of falls by the wayside. So tell me about this idea of finding that hidden brilliance, illuminating, but also in a world where you're just surviving and not thriving.
Yeah, I'm gonna break the rules here a bit and start with the two traps that people run into. Number one is when a company is thriving and the people aren't. That's challenging because what happens is you might have the signal that says, hey, we're doing great. And, why should we worry about investing in that, the hidden brilliance of our teams or the worrying about our people because everything's looking great on paper and the numbers are looking great. So, hey, nothing's wrong. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right.
And I don't want to like call out teams, but let's say Google, right? Google's doing great overall. I mean, they're, a wonderful organization. But oftentimes you might see some fractures inside. They laid off people. They've had a lot of challenges with, trying to keep the culture alive in the way that they have. And so I think there's elements of big companies like that they tend to get a little bit complacent with how are they, fostering that sense of connection, the thriving of their people. So that's one part of it that it can be challenging. When things are good, how do we make sure we're keeping it good and we're also focusing on the resources that are actually making it possible, the people.
Right.
So that's one aspect, but also the element of making sure that they're looking at when things aren't going so well, they're just triaging. The company itself is just trying to survive, and they say, we don't have the time or the money to focus on that. And so then what happens is the ripple effect is people are just like trying to hold on to their jobs. So there's this concept of job hugging.
Yep.
And so then they're checked out. They're just kind of figuring out how do I just hold on to what I have and just do the bare minimum to get by so I don't get fired.
Right.
So those are the two traps I start seeing. And so ultimately we have to have leaders who see the visionary aspect of it, so to say. If we don't invest in our people and seeing who they really are and bringing that, harnessing that potential in our organizations, we're going to fail. Even if we're looking good on paper. The long-term accelerator of our growth and our scale is the people of our organization. And we have to see how they can add value well beyond their titles.
And so with that, let's not make this a doom and gloom AI conversation,
Please.
but how AI can sort of relieve that, like in a way where And of course, the argument for any AI company is like the only thing it's going to do is it'll replace rudimentary tasks and people can do other things. So, which on paper, yes, it's possible, but it'll also replace jobs. But again, this is not going to be doom and gloom. We're going to be positive. How does AI, do you think, fit into this world of following the hidden brilliance framework, where people can do that, bring their outside into the office,
Yeah.
and then actually give them time to do that? Because I think there is this old school CEO boss mentality of, and this is the whole argument of back to work, people back in the office is like, I need to see that my people are doing something, right?
Yeah.
I need to walk around and I need to see them like on hunched over a computer, typing away really fast. And so how do you leave space for that?
Yeah.
That like, okay, like CEOs, don't freak out that your people don't seem as busy. Because I think that is one of the things, and connecting it to the survive and thrive thing, in the culture that we talk about of bosses seeing their people working hard and being busy, that's surviving and thriving. But in the boss's brain, oh, good, right?
Yeah.
I'm paying these people, so they're not slacking off.
Mm-hmm.
AI, as this added component here now, will free them up to find that hidden brilliance.
Yeah.
But so my question to you is, how do we let CEOs and leaders say, it's okay that if I look in the office, my one of my employees has their desk up and they're reading something, what have you? How do we connect that to the? Because I think that's how we can. That's how AI fits in this world. It will make the employees' lives better, but at the same time, the bosses can't be like, oh, geez, why are we paying all these people? They're just sitting around looking for their hidden brilliance.
I mean, I think I'll react to this in two ways.
Yeah.
First of all, the aspect of like, playing around and what have you is that's not what we're really tapping into. What we're doing is we want to make sure that people are going to hold themselves accountable because they feel energized by the work that they're doing. And so when they're bringing these elements of who they are into their work, what's happening is they're going to hold themselves accountable, and the people around them are going to hold themselves accountable because they're seeing them more fully, and they're going to start noticing that it's not about the extra time, it's about knowing that when they're there, they're actually engaged more fully. So, the old adage of like, if I can't see it, I can't control it,
Right.
is really not a concern here, because what's going to happen is people are going to self-regulate. The teams are going to self-regulate, because what's going to happen is they're going to be more connected. You're also going to weed out the people who are just there to collect a paycheck or to do the sneaky things like, I'll just, clock in and then I'll just go do whatever I want. Well, those people are not going to be as engaged in this organization, because they're going to feel like, well, these people aren't my people, because they're not, they're all energized.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Oh, that's great. It makes me think of like, I'm not sure if you follow baseball, but in baseball, managers often say is like, hey man, I'm the guy that writes the lineup card. I take the pitcher out, all that stuff. The players self-police. Like there are either appointed or just known leaders who will be there to be like, hey man, it doesn't have to be the manager or the GM or the owner say, it's other players. So the accountability piece, how does that work in a world where, and you mentioned Google and Netflix is known for radical transparency, radical candor. How does that work, the accountability part work, in terms of being able to do that in a respectful manner that then again doesn't have ripple effects in a negative way of that accountability piece? Tell me what your thoughts are on that in terms of keeping people accountable, but also finding a way to do it with humanity.
Yeah. Well, you just touched a nerve on that, because I think there's something about that which has been part of my ethos around coaching people along the way. I always say that there's my style of coaching with people, working with people, is compassionate accountability, which is paradoxical, because people always think like, how can you be compassionate and accountable? It seems like two different sides of a spectrum. You have to care deeply about people and have a compassion for where people are, meeting them where they are, and wanting the best for them. And so compassion is that first element, but holding them accountable is also about knowing that you want the best for them. And you're going to not please them, but serve them. And serving them is sometimes about saying, I want you to try hard things. I want you to do things that you're not used to doing, because getting out of your comfort zone is going to lead to growth. And so that accountability element and compassion, when combined, becomes like a superpower, a super element of leaders helping others to get out of their complacency. And I think when you have compassion and accountability for people, what happens is wonderful things happen. They start to know that you care, and you'll hold them accountable. And that means when they start slacking off, doing things that are not really aligned with the overall goal of the organization, you're going to call them out on it, and that's okay. It's not. This is not about a free ride. We're not talking about just letting say, oh, everyone just kumbaya, let's go and do our thing. You want to make sure people know that this is real stuff, but we want to do real stuff with your real potential.
How does this accountability piece work beyond titles? Because I think people feel like, oh, unless I have the MGR in my title or DIR in my title, I can't keep other people accountable. How would you suggest people do that with coworkers or even people above them? Because sometimes I always love leaders that are like, I love when my people I love feedback. Give me feedback. And then they'll ignore it 9 out of 10 times. But I love it. Just give it to me. I'm gonna ignore it. But let's ignore that. I'm just talking about in terms of a team, and if you don't have that sort of quote unquote corner office or fancy title, how do you work? How's that accountability piece work in that sort of realm?
I love that you bring this up, because there's something about this which is sometimes when I work with teams, I'll talk about a team identity and crafting a team identity, and so it starts to build this framework for the team to hold each other accountable through this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is why we do it. And that identity is almost coming to what is our hidden brilliance as a team that is codified through all the people who are in it. And then as new people come on board, you can start to say well, now that we've added this new person, how does that change our identity? Does it or does it not? And how did that person fit in? And that accountability becomes something that, we can start to build our own sense of inner framework of how do we want to hold people accountable within this framework? And then how does that connect with the overall organization? So you start at different layers, and I think that's hopefully it answers your question, but it's just an element of understanding how to create the right structure that allows us to say, who are we, who am I, who are we, and how does that connect with the big picture?
I love that. All right, so after knowing you for a few months, spending a lot of time with you, we actually shared chicken wings at one point,
Yes.
which is a big step in a relationship. Messy eating. That's when you've connected. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I've heard you talk, I've heard your speeches, read your book. One word that I don't ever see you use a lot, and I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, is the word culture. And I feel like people in your space, and trust me, I've interviewed many an author who've written a book about people and culture, that's front and center. Is that intentional that you do not use? Not that you've never used that word. I'm not saying that it's not in your vocabulary, but it's not one of those things you hang your hat on. Is that intentional? That you don't want to be the culture guy? I don't want to be known for culture. Tell me about that.
It's a great question. And honestly, I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but it is something that I just feel as though culture is something, it's ethereal.
Yep.
And it is something that it happens by all the other things you do. And so it's kind of a follow-on effect. It's the result of all the work that you're putting in, the identity, the people, the connection. And so it's, when people say, describe your culture, it's like you almost know it through all the actions and things that people are doing. It's not something that you can say, I've designed this culture intentionally and this is what it is. No, it's not that way. And so to me, culture is a wonderful thing, and obviously it's something that I care deeply about, but it's almost like it's an after effect of all the things that you're doing to design all of the inner workings of who you are.
Have you ever thought about that before? Or am I the first idiot to bring that up?
You're
the
first idiot. I'm kidding. No, it is, I've actually, someone's asked that question before to me, but I haven't really, been thinking very intentionally about, how am I going to put that in the book and really. But
it's funny because the way you say it, it's just because it's so obvious that it's culture, right? Mm-hmm. But 9 out of 10 times, people in your position not be the tagline, or be in be name of the book or something like that. And I found it funny that you just, and again, didn't know if it was intentional or not. So I wanted to bring that up because I think for some people, culture is obvious if you're doing the things you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But for other people, they're like, oh yeah, don't forget the culture piece. Have we gotten to the point where talking about culture almost is a disservice because you're talking about the wrong thing? Because like you said, if you're doing this other things, the culture that creates, it's oh, it's like
Yeah.
the shining light. And I know this is a very nuanced conversation we're having, but this idea of like putting culture and like people joke about like putting culture on your wall and everything like that is nonsense. But the idea of like if you're doing all these things, the end result is culture. So
Yeah.
there's no need to talk about culture because that's the end point.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to this idea of like if you say this is our culture, then and someone says, but that's not exactly who I am, and
Or what
therefore-
we do.
or what we do, and so therefore it's almost like, okay, well, I get it, so now maybe this isn't my place. And but what if someone who's going to come to your office is going to say like, look, I can add to something to this culture that will make it even something better than what it is. And so there's an element of additiveness that comes from someone new bringing fresh perspective that actually brings a new element to the culture. And so I think there's something about that which is really beautiful and interesting. And so don't limit yourself.
No, it's great. Good stuff.
By dictating, this is our culture, and
Yeah.
therefore you get in line or you get out.
Do you think, and I know, again, you're not the culture guy, but do you think people overcomplicate culture? Because, I've been in organizations that'll have, like, these are our 10 guideposts and principles, thank you. My limited vocabulary. But I'll often say, like, here are my principles. Work hard, be nice to people. Like, to me, that's... I mean, and I know it's probably too small to fit in a poster. You'd have to use a big graphic. But why do you think... Again, you're not the culture guy. Why do you think people feel the need to have 10 principles, overcomplicate things? And again, and as you know, Tony, from knowing me and eating chicken wings, very simple person. But like, if you think about like where I come from, was like, work hard, be nice to people. Isn't that basically the embodiment of culture? You're going to work hard to do your job, and you're going to treat everyone with respect and be kind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be as simple as just, a simple message, couple principles. That is wonderful when you can just boil it down that way, because you want to send an easy message people can get on board with, and to be like, okay, that's what we need to do to figure out how to be on board here and to get along. I think that's great. And also that gives people wiggle room to understand, okay, so when I express myself in this way, or when I show up this way as a different person, that's okay and that's acceptable. If you had way too many principles, then what happens is it starts to kind of like be like, well, I get this one, but I don't get this one, or I'm not sure if I can be aligned with that. And it becomes hard for people to really assimilate into a culture if they can't align with all the principles. And so I think less is more, but make sure the less is powerful and meaningful, and really it's what you want people to understand and know about you.
Awesome. It's been a great couple of days, Tony. If folks want to connect with you, keep track of the book, all the other stuff you're doing, where should they start?
Well, the best place is to come to my website, tonymspeaks.com. It's where you'll learn about the book, my past books, my podcasts, all the fun things I'm up to these days. So it's a great place. And then you can go to my LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and always sharing fun things there as well.
Awesome. Great. Tony, it's been awesome spending the last couple of days with you. Wish you the best, and hopefully see you next time at South by Southwest.
You bet.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Tony and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.